A little about this fascinating journey of a legend, Frank O.Gehry. What has been his fascinating journey since a little child? Frank is 91 today. Where did it all start? Well, to remind all of us, it's fitting on this day to relive and look back at the life and times of a great man, a different man, the one and only Frank O.Gehry. As the young boy grew, he was a creative child, often playing with wooden blocks given to him by his grandmother, which were sourced from scrapyards and the furniture business. He loved museums, going to concerts, enjoying music and art. And yes, they would all come permanent elements that would influence his design in times to come. To move on, architecture did not come immediately. It did not come suddenly. There was a stage when the future master designer would be many things. As you see on the screen, yes, he was a truck driver. He took admission to architecture before all of these things. And he has gone on record. You can see all this is on the Wikipedia. And we, as students of architecture and as professionals, we have read this paragraph time and time again, where he tried chemical engineering. And then he realized, what is it that I like? And that's where we go back to his influences in early childhood. So, reminded of his early days, he took admission to architecture. Friends, we have seen this, absorbed it, and marveled at the journey, the persona of this man. After this, let's move on ahead. Next slide. Yes. So finally, the young man, he did take admission to the University of Southern California, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Degree Architecture. He did take some time out after doing bachelor's. He did not jump into master's. Surprisingly, he did a stint in the US Army. We do not have more details about this, but it seems interesting that he took this as a stopgap between a graduation and a master's degree. After this, he went to the hallowed Harvard Graduate School of Design, where he studied city planning. Friends, these probably must have been very defining moments for him at that time. We will never know. Of course, the crowning moment was in 1989. After embarking on a lifetime of design, this is what happens when you do things that affect the globe, that affect thousands and millions of people all over the world, and when the world recognizes you as a true master. As the jury said, always open to experimentation, and they have compared him to the fine artist also. Friend, what you see on the screen are all the iconic buildings that we've all studied, and this is what Frank O.Gehry has been doing all his life. The man, the visionary, the architect, the guru, the design maestro. How many names and how many connotations can be added to this introduction? Well, let's go on. This is not what we are here for, are we? So what are we here for? Let me elaborate. Today, friends, we are all a fortunate bunch of people because, to move on, next slide, please. Yes. Friends, this is what we are here for. To know about what the experience is working with Frank Gehry in that wonderful studio in Los Angeles. And how will we be doing that? With the help of two wonderful architects who will be in conversation with three wonderful people. Next slide.
Friends, I am very happy to welcome and introduce Jayant Kulkarni, who is the founder, member and managing director at Epicons Consultants Pvt Limited. A graduate from VJTI Mumbai's 1976 batch, he pursued a master's in the same college. As a senior fellow of Institution of Engineers, Institute of Valuers, and a life member of ISSC and ICI, his advice and mentorship has always meant a lot. An engineer and leader of a large team of 166 persons, has been working in multiple avenues of civil engineering, design, architecture and project management, and of course structural design. Jayant Kulkarni has had a bag full of awards from the most respected organizations. Of course, he is a gentle mentor, a social entrepreneur, if you can say that, and participant in giving back a lot to society. Thank you, sir. It's a great privilege and honor to welcome you. I now request Jayant Kulkarni to tell all of you a little about Epicon's Friends of Concrete. Over to you, Jayant sir.
Welcome all of you once again on behalf of Epicon Friends of Concrete, and we are into this training activity since 1999. This particular work or activity is conducted under umbrella of Epicons Consultants Pvt. Limited. It's ISO 9001-2015 certified company, and one of our objective, as defined at the time of ISO certification, is imparting technical knowledge to society at large and interested parties. But the history goes long back. Our inspiration is late engineer C.A.P. Remedios. He's our friend, philosopher, and guru, and he taught us concrete technology on site like his granddaughter. And taking inspiration from him, we started Epicon Friends of Concrete. We had been conducting workshops in past. Now started webinar series since lockdown on various topics through our unit EFC dedicated to training. EFC has conducted 79 workshops in last 21 years and 8 webinars in last 2 months. EFC's humble effort to generate knowledge sharing platform and develop a facility for continued education for government and semi-government authorities, engineers, architects, builders, contractors, and of course students. These are the two photographs of participant workshop 55 and workshop 70 at the location where the workshop was conducted. Pitkar was always supporter in all our workshops. And with this, let me introduce my team, which is, these are our director and unit head of Epicons Consultant also. Apart from me, it is Anand Kulkarni, Ravindra Deshpande, Mr. Pandey, and Parashar, who is a speaker today. And with this, let me complete my introduction of myself, my company, and I thank you all on behalf of entire volunteer team, which is a mix of management and all the volunteers. This photograph is taken at the time of workshop 75, and this particular webinar, Viha and Hitali, had been prime key person getting more and more participants. Right now, number has gone to 305. With this, I hand it over to Priya.
Thank you so much, sir. Friends, what a wonderful introduction of a wonderful company. I now would like to introduce architect Parashar Moghe. Like his namesake, who is said to be the author of ancient Indian texts, Parashar has written the scripts of hundreds of buildings through his quiet, efficient style. Like the Virgo that he is, Parashar is someone who is hardworking, creative, and reliable. Rather wonderful qualities for an architect, I must say. With over 2 decades designing and being with buildings in the power corridors of corporate companies, Parashar began his career in golden style. It's with great delight that I also learned recently that Parashar is a musician and has a particular affinity to playing the keyboard, specifically the blues. Parashar, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. I request you to say hi to the audience. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Priya. That was quite a flattering and a wonderful intro that you gave. At this point, I would like to give a brief description about Epicon Consultants, what we do, what we are. I guess most of the people over here, they know us as company, but I see there are a lot of new people who have joined, and just let me introduce. So Epicon Consultants is almost a 35-year-old company. We are almost 140 plus technical force that we have, 8,000 plus projects completed. We work majorly as structural designers with annexed with project management consultancy, architectural and detail engineering consultancy, assessment, and non-destructive testing services. So these are the kind of plethora that we work with. We have been working with a lot of industrial projects, residential projects, hospitality, commercial. Now the recent thing that we joined was some infra projects that we are doing. Of course, we have been rated by some of the agencies, like we have NABL accreditation, then we are like ISO 2000, ISO certified company. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Here I'll just pass on through some major projects that we are currently involved in, where we are involved in as PMC, as structural consultants, somewhere we are working as architectural consultants, and so on and so forth. So this is a major project that we have been working. This is in Varda. This is kind of an urban development project. This is spread out through 3 particular villages, the total development. It is a world-class campus development, Mahatma Gandhi Ashram. The total somewhere around 370 crores of project value. That is what is estimated at this moment. And we'll be having a lot of kind of the urban sort of development with development of several nodes. That is a lot of auditoriums, cycling tracks, landscaping, eco-forest park, riverfront development, so on and so forth. The next project that we are currently associated with is the Makers Max City project. This is basically the project by Indian Film Combined. Project almost 650 crores. It's a huge development in a very difficult kind of a site conditions, and where we were employed as quality assurance, quality control of concrete at site. And here we were supposed to adapt the durability criterion as per the international standards. So that was quite a learning curve for us also. The project is quite big, having a 7-star hotel, 300 guest rooms, restaurants. There's a mall, there's the drive-in. So quite a commercial type of a project, but a complex one. And we're like quite proud to be associated with this. The next, we are like associated with this new project. That's the Operations Control Center at this is for MMRDA, and this is at that controversial site of RA. It's under the planning stages right now. It's a huge operation control center, 32-story structure with this has got a platinum. We are aiming for the platinum rating for IGBC. Yeah, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the projects that we are involved. Next is like the core strength, that is the structural designing. You can see this graph kind of a thing that is done. So it's almost like from 70 meters high building to a 245 meters high building. That is what we have been working through. There are almost more than probably 70, 75 plus projects that are there. Yeah, and this is where we are located. We are majorly located in Mumbai, and we have our branch office at Ahmedabad too. Yeah, and that's it about Epicons Consultants. I'll give it to Priya. Yes,
Thank
Priya.
you. Thank you, Parashar. That
Thanks.
was a wonderful and very sweet introduction. So moving on, I'm very happy to inform all of you that we have in our midst an individual who can be safely said to be an institution. Whether it is architecture or teaching or being a collector of unique objects, architect Professor Yashwant Pitkar is something that all of us aspire to be and are inspired by. His work in architecture covers a wide range of design projects, including involvement in charitable projects as well. Since 2004, he has been a senior associate with Upasani Design Cell, amongst many other very memorable parts of his architectural career. Professor Pitkar has also been deeply interested in the young generation going leaps and bounds in their life. Because of this, he has worked in the consultancy cell of Sir J.J. College of Architecture, being a faculty there for 28 long years. Currently, Pitkar sir is senior faculty in Academy of Architecture since 2016. He is particularly a favorite among students. Needless to say, his anecdotes about interactions and meetings with people like Hassan Fatehi, Buckminster Fuller, and Paolo Soleri are quite something. Sir, it's a great honor for us to have you here, and may I request you now to address the gathering.
Thank you very much, Priya, for a very elaborate and a very long introduction. Thanks a lot. I am also thankful to Jayant Kulkarni and his complete team from Parashar to Hitali, everyone whom I've been knowing and been associated with them, because I find that apart from doing the routine works that we always keep doing, it is important that we venture into all other things which can benefit one and all, right from students and professionals. Thank you, Priya, once again, and good evening to one and all. And there's a very, I mean, as she said, there are very tangent ideas I do come across. And I can say that there is one very important saying that if architecture had nothing to do with art, it would have been so easy to build. And the same goes that if one doesn't have passion, nothing great would have been possible. The second experience from my the thought from my personal experience in the field of teaching is that uh, we find that there are all kind of architects and works right from Laurie Baker to other people which comes up, and one can say that uh, even architecture and architects is born within the school and outside the school. So there is a huge amount of avenue available for somebody who is creative. Many great architects are self-made. They are very passionate. I mean, look at Frank O.Gehry himself. I mean, after doing all kind of things that you must have read in his biodata on the Google, he is a dreamer of all kind. I mean, think of Michelangelo, think of Gaudi, think of Nari Gandhi, and so many more people who have been doing great works of art. And these are iconic things that makes us think, yes, there is life, there is architecture, then the mundane buildings that are all around. And today we have Franco Gehry, and the very name, when you take in a given classroom at any level from first year to fifth year, there are sparkles in the eyes of students and even professionals, because uh, that's a name to reckon with. I mean, look at the what he has done at Bilbao. I mean, one sleeping town now is bustling with thousands and thousands of tourists. Some of my friends said that they went all the way for a day to look at that museum. And so we have here a journey through the mind and through the works of Gehry, the master architect. And this will be done doing through the eyes of Shridhar Rao and Shikha Doogar, who have who are lucky, I would say. I mean, who are not just they, who are very, very lucky, who could spend so many years of their life over there working in the office, spending time with him, and having interacted on a day-to-day basis for more than 5 years. So it will be a great learning experience for all of us. So without taking much of your time, I hand it over to Sridhar and Shikha. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So can we move on to the next slide? Yes. So friends, as you can see, that's me. My name is Priya Gokhale, and I represent a Pune-based organization which is called Wide Angle Forum. Next slide, please. Yes. So friends, we work in 5 verticals. Wide Angle Forum is the umbrella organization. I like to think of it as an acronym for WIDE, that is working in design and enterprise. As I look at it, the philosophy in this runs like this. You can have pots of money, but if there's no design, it's no point. And you can be the biggest dreamer, but you need some budget to start with, right? So this is what I mean by the Wide Angle Forum. Under the Wide Angle Forum, we have 5 verticals. One is where we conduct enriching programs. That is the Wide Angle Forum. The second is that we have a national level magazine, which is a quarterly called Design Vista. Third is that we have an in-house academy called Aspire Academy, where professionals as well as students attend for workshops, online, offline, both. The fourth division is that we have a unique tour kind of model called Safar, where we undertake day-long tours to very, very unique places. And it's really fun being together in a mixed group. We've started a newsletter called Wave, which will contain everything except architecture. And finally, something that I'm very proud of, we have a wide angle book club, which is like our giving back to society. So friends, we are many people. There's not one person in this. There are many wonderful people who have been helping us. We'll be 5 years old on 5th September, which is Teachers' Day. That's our foundation day, because I feel as an architect, you should always be a student. And that's why we started our journey on 5th September 2015. It's a strange coincidence that today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 60th program where Wide Angle Forum has been a part of. And I'm heartfelt thanking all of you, Jayant sir, Parashar, Pitkar sir, Shraddha and Shikha, for this wonderful opportunity of us associating with you. So on this note, friends, I thank all of you again. I hope to be in touch with you. And now we move on to the next slide. Friends, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our speakers for today, Shridhar and Shikha. I'm honored, I'm curious, extremely impatient too, to welcome them here. Architects Shridhar Rao and Shikha Doogar are principal architects of R+D Studio. A little about them. Both have over 18 years of experience working on various types and scale of projects. Their extensive international experience straddles wonderful names like Studio U+A, Perkins Eastman, EEK, NBBJ, and Gehry Partners. The duo has worked with world-renowned architect Frank O.Gehry on some of the world's most prestigious projects, such as the New World Symphony Campus expansion, Battery Park Play Space and Spa Hotel in Russia, the Guggenheim Museum Abu Dhabi, the Foundation Louis Vuitton, the Leahy Master Plan, 22-acre Brooklyn Atlantic Yards Master Plan, and many others. Their work has been featured in Ars Daily and Domus Web, amongst many others again. Shridhar, Shikha, I'm very happy for two things. One is that we have become friends, and second is I'm extremely happy to see what's in store for us on this presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Shridhar and Shikha would be in conversation with Jayant sir, Parashar, and Pitkar sir. First, they will take us through their time spent at Frank O.Gehry's studio, after which they will tell us a little about their work at their firm R+D Studio, which is based in Gurgaon. Next slide, please. Something which I'm extremely happy to do. I love this part of the program, where I thank this wonderful audience. I have no idea who is there. In a physical venue, I can see the faces. I can smile to somebody sitting out there. There are friends in the studio whom I can, or in the venue whom I can wave. But on an online platform, I'm speaking to myself. And yet I can feel the vibes of all these 312 people who are logged on a rainy evening. So a round of applause for this wonderful audience. We really treasure and we cherish your presence here, each and every one of you. And I thank you for coming here. Before we start, once again, Shridhar and Shikha will engage in conversation with Professor Yashwant Pitkar, Engineer Jayant Kulkarni, and Parashar Moghe of Epicons Consultants, and a little bit with me, Priya Gokhale of Wide Angle Forum. Next slide, please. Yes. So now I request this dashing duo to begin their presentation, and I have one question to start with. I have the privilege of asking the first question. A little unexpected probably. I would like to ask you from the point of view of any architect from the age of 25 to 60, how did you get an opportunity to work at the Frank O.Gehry studio?
Thanks, Priya. A lovely introduction, and hello to all the audience. This is me, Shikha, and along with me I have Shridhar Rao. We'll also give a little introduction of ourselves when we start the presentation, but very quick one because I think a lot has been said. It was actually just a 3-year plan that we had: study at an Ivy League, get out, work, and come back. But things don't happen the way you plan. So by the time we got the opportunity, we were already in New York for 5 years at a good level, intermediate level architecture. And when Sridhar actually got the first opportunity to work, he was looking for a change, and just out of fancy, he went and gave an interview at Frank's office. And
yeah, I mean, I didn't take too much of that interview or the interaction that I had with the gentleman from Frank's office. In fact, I didn't even take it too seriously. So in the evening when I received a mail, I was offered a salary, and that was almost 20% to 30% less than what I was currently getting in New York. So it was a catch-22, and I asked Shikha, I was like, what do you think we should do? And the answer was very obvious. He's like, why do you think we came to the US? So next thing I know, I packed my bags and shifted to LA without realizing what I was getting into. And after my journey there, I think 3 months later, there was another position that came up, and Shikha was there to interview in LA as well. And she ended up with a choice to make, because in one day she had 2 interviews. And
yeah, like I had an interview at Gensler, and then I had an interview at Frank's office. And which is funny. The reason I took up Frank's office was because I did not know how to drive. So obviously it was easier to hitchhike a ride with Shridhar and go to work than, making my way through California, LA to Gensler's office, which is on the other side. And learning to drive was not something I was ready for coming from New York. It's like a Mumbaiker would not want to move to Delhi because now of course the metro is there. But
right.
Well, I'll tell you the secret. There's also another aspect of it. So she said we will save some petrol money. And therefore, let's hitch a ride and go to the same office.
But these are wonderful memories. So wonderful. We can start the presentation.
Right. So I'm going to start sharing our screen. Right. So we are here to take you through the design process of what we know as the great Frank O.Gehry's evolution of what starts from a sketch to actually what gets realized in the buildings, the amazing buildings that you actually see.
So this is us. That's Shridhar and me a couple of years back. And it's, an introduction's all been given by Priya. A little studio in New York. Not in New York, I wish it was in New York, but it's in Gurgaon. Sorry about that. So this is our office in Gurgaon. So the idea of this entire project is that we plan to touch upon the entire methodology of the design process at Frank's office via 3 different projects. The first project is Lou Rouault Brain Institute, Las Vegas. In this, the design evolution process is going to be related to the entire, how you take a project from concept to design development. Then surface panelization and rationalization through the Beekman Tower, New York, as surface is something that Frank really works a lot with different materials. But of course, because of the time span, we'll only be talking about one material here. And then, of course, construction, administration, and execution through the Marquis de Riscal in Spain. So these are the 3 projects that we'll be covering in our project, in the entire presentation. So anyway, starting with the first part of the presentation, that is the Frank O.Gehry process. So everybody always asks, how does Frank design? That is one question that's there in everybody's mind. But before we get into that, let me just go through very quickly a few projects that, for the viewers over here and the listeners, so that, you can just, get a fresh glimpse of what all has been happening. So this is Guggenheim Museum, Bilbao, Spain. Of course, the very, very well known. It has transformed Bilbao as a city. This is Disney Concert Hall, Los Angeles. Again, it revived downtown in Los Angeles, which was a dead area. This is the Lou Rouault Brain Institute, Las Vegas. A newly completed building, the UTS Business School, Sydney, which is made of entirely brick. The Marriott Marquis de Riscal, Spain. The Vaughan Center, Cincinnati, for molecular studies. This is a very, very old building, in fact. Beekman Tower, New York City, which we'll be talking about. This is Foundation Louis Vuitton, Paris. This is Shridhar's pet project. He himself has worked on all the on this very, very closely. And anyway, so in all of these buildings, you can see that there's a sense of movement, fluidity in its architecture. Frank has always tried to capture the essence of a building in movement. It doesn't matter what the material is. So how does he actually go about achieving this? And it is because of this particular fluidity and the shapes and the forms, the sculpting that he does out of a building, that people like to invite him to, do buildings and do projects. So, and the best way to explain this is through, I'm sure most of you are aware of the Simpsons comic strip. It's a TV show. So basically, I'm just going to explain this. Let's consider a situation as depicted by this famous TV series, The Simpsons. Marge, as a chairman of the cultural committee, proposes that the town builds a new concert hall so that the Springfield would be seen as a cultured and refined place. So who should we invite? That's of course the question. And she thinks of Frank Gehry, as he's the most prominent architect in the US. So Gehry checks his mail and finds a letter that Marge sends him. He's delighted. So in that excitement, he just crumples that paper and tosses it on the ground. And that's where he gets that inspiration to do the concert hall. And post that, Mr. Gehry presents his design to the Springfield Town Hall, and everybody loves it. They want to build it, and then the construction starts, and of course it starts with the very rectilinear rectangular building instead. And of course Marge is very, very worried, like it's nothing like what the building looks like. So suddenly you get the wrecking balls are there on site, and they start breaking it, shaping the structure. And once the final form is arrived, Frank comes to site, gives a thumbs up in approval, and hopes that Marge is very happy with the output. And that's how he actually builds his buildings. What do you guys think? Is that how it happens? Wrong. It's, it's the whole conception about the fact that Frank designs all these buildings, just, shapes them, and then the architecture is resolved. It's just the opposite in the studio. Frank O.Gehry Associates, or FOGA, undergoes an exhaustive process right from the conception to the design till the realization of it. And to showcase this, I will take you through Lou Rover Brain Institute, Las Vegas. The project usually starts with a simple blocking diagram of the program. Each of the boxes represent a program and its area, and the very basic idea of its arrangements exploration begins. Individual adjacencies are explored, proximities are analyzed, proximities meaning that how close one program should be from the other, associations of different programs. These are not your traditional bubble diagram that we are taught, but these are actual adjacencies that are studied and understand first individually, and then a master diagram is put together. This is where association with adjacency diagrams began, which we actually have absorbed into our practice very heavily. Above studies results in a master diagram, the DNA of the project in terms of its functioning. There is no deviating from this master diagram, and we will always keep referring to every design iteration that we do to whether it is conferring to this particular diagram. So post this, we go through an exhaustive process of site iterations and arrangements based on the adjacencies parameters that are tested out through these colored block models. Hundreds of these can be put together for a project based on what Frank is thinking. So usually it's about, we start with a good 10 number of iterations, like all the possibilities, all the combinations that are possible on site. Some more of these iterations are studied. Once the chosen one is settled, then within the same arrangement, opaque and transparency is then analyzed through this process, testing out what portion should be built transparent and what should be opaque. So now also what you'll notice is that we've started taking photographs in certain angles, and these photographs are going to be constantly repeated again and again throughout this presentation. You'll see that, camera angles and the way the project is conceived, the way the building sits is very, very important. And it's still till to date, it's a very physical experience in the office. And models range from like a scale of 1:1000 to 1:1 in the office. So, which then results in a final arrangement. This is the end of concept design in the studio, where we will actually post a very rigorous process of maybe 3 to 4 months. We will come to this final arrangement where you will have the understanding of where what block sits. Again, you can still see that these blocks are still pretty rectilinear. There is nothing happened in terms of shaping in this. Post this starts the schematic design process. And at this point, we actually, we sit with Frank and we review the entire project. And then Frank does some conceptual sketch. And of course, we get his version 1 of his sketch. Like, okay, now we have the blocks. Now this is what I'm thinking about. So at the beginning of the schematic design, Frank introduces his sketch. He thinks about Lou Rover, the Brain Institute. He splits the arrangement into 2 parts. Like you can see in the sketch, the left and the right, one free and artistic, whereas the other is more restrained and logical. So that was the discussion that happened over the sketch. I had briefly worked on this project towards, towards the construction administration part of it, and when the building was being done. So anyway, taking the concept, blocking into schematic based on Frank's sketch, which then results in more iterations. The whole process oscillates between the model and the sketch, where the sketch has its genesis. We will discuss that a little later. But you can see that that sketch is still conforming. You can see the movement between the left and the right happening in all these models. Then the models, of course, like I said earlier, they're being studied through the medium of photographs. Frank is actually quite adverse to digital visualization, and the sculptor in him likes his models too much, like he loves these physical models, and a huge part of the office is dedicated as a model workshop and a photography studio. So like I said, you'll see these photographs being, same angles being repeated to analyze the views and the forms and the shapes. Then again, through these discussions, we get another sketch where the left and the right is nothing but the brain, which is the source of his idea for the project. Frank's drawings are usually driven by an inspiration from Bernini's Falls to the amphibians to the topography to the temples of India. So, Frank's, most of his ideas and his inspirations are quite rooted in tradition or in the past or in the history. He loves his like Priya had mentioned, he loves his museums and paintings and so on and so forth. So anyway, once we have this version 2 of the sketch then eventually, we try to look how it gets translated into into the models. So once the block arrangements was finalized, we towards the end of the schematics, the exterior arrangement started to, like, we started looking at what the exterior is going to be. So the entire project now is divided into 2 parts. We have this free-flowing trellis that sits over the Brain Institute, and the rectilinear part that you see on the top is the clinical part, and the front, which is more of the banquet space and the reception area. Again, similarly, photographs and angles are studied, and further observations are done to see the development. The trellis becomes the free and creative part of the brain, and the clinical bay becomes the static part, the public versus the private concept that we can talk about maybe in our studio terms. The clinical bay of the institute also undergoes various studies. It's not that because it's a static part, we're just going to make a block and leave it there. So even that goes through a lot of iterations. So some of these photographs depict the different iterations that we've done. More studies to finally shape, it starts shaping itself, and a checkered, solid and void arrangement is, preferred by Frank. And of course that, while this was being done here, the inspiration was, the stone mines, which were in very close proximity to Las Vegas. So these are the stone mines over there. So that analogy is kind of, that's what is created. So like I was saying, like as averse that Frank is to digital visualization, but he's a big propagator of technology. So it's digital visualization versus digital tools, I would say, right, Shridhar?
Yes.
So point cloud scanner, a very important tool in the office. I will let Shridhar start talking about this. He has personally used this quite extensively in the office. So.
Right. So a point cloud scanner is like a typical camera. What they do is they introduce these highlighted dots that you see and use them as markers to take pictures from all 360 degrees to ensure that each and every nook and corner of that particular object is captured. Now, this particular technology was more prevalent in Hollywood, and because LA is the capital of Hollywood, Frank is, it goes without saying that Frank will use that technology. In fact, Frank has always been in a lookout for other kind of tools, digital technology that can help push his architecture, translate his architecture to reality. So coming back, the point cloud scanner is then used to sort of scan this particular model. A 3D version of the same was created, and then it's brought into a software that was developed by Frank Gehry called Digital Projects. Now, one may ask, why do you need to use a point cloud scanner? And like I explained, there are these corners of a particular building that cannot be captured by a digitizer tool. A digitizer tool is like a pen that can pick up any particular curve in 3D space, but you are only able to do so much with it. And therefore, in this kind of a complex geometry, we had to use that. So the point cloud scanner eventually ends up in a surface model like this. And as you can see that every possible corner of that physical model has been captured, and we are able to then take this piece of a digital file and then replicate that particular file in digital projects. The software that uses this particular point cloud scanner to create surfaces. So Geomagic creates these triangulated technique of creating the surface, and from these triangulations we import this particular model into digital projects and then replicate that surface curve by curve. And then we do a reference with the base model to make sure that the replicated new geometry that we have created in digital projects is as close to the original file as possible, so that it doesn't look a completely different model by the end of it.
So the left one is the one that has been done in geosurfaces, and the right one is the one that's been done in digital project. Another image is here comparing the model. You can see that the left one right here is the one that's done in geosurfaces, and the right one here is done in digital projects.
So if the digital project model is about 95% same as the physical model, then it's usually a go ahead, and then unless there are any geometrical errors. So at this point of time, we have an absolutely accurate digital file that replicates the physical model. And that's when we basically connected completed the circle of the physical model, starting this iteration and being the driver of the design process. And eventually towards the end of that design process, the digital model then overtakes the physical model, because now is when you start generating drawings and details and all kinds of information that can be extrapolated from it.
So now this particular model that you see on the site plan is actually a version of the digital model. It's no longer the physical model that we had been earlier working with, which has actually now been translated into a digital file and now recreated into a physical model. So, I mean, of course, very tedious process. I mean, a lot of you will ask, why do you want to do this? And but we'll answer these a little later.
Yeah, I mean, it's a joy of creativity. I mean, why does a sculptor make several iterations before he finds that perfect curve or a perfect fold or a perfect move? It's the same. It's the same with like a dancer making those, training over and over and over again to try and perfect their move.
So now once this actual physical model is in its final state, this becomes the reference for everything. We're going to see that this is the first set of site plan that is created. So digital projects and AutoCAD work together to create some of these phenomenal drawings that the office has produced. In case if anyone is ever visiting Gurgaon, you're most welcome to come and visit our office. We have a huge collection of drawings from the office dating from projects that we were not actually in the office then, like some going as far as 1980s, I think, because the gentleman who was in charge of all these detailing was an East European gentleman and who was very fond of Raj Kapoor movies. And when we went and joined his office, it was like, when he was retiring, it was like he gave them to us, and we became like the caretakers of his entire set. He said, what am I going to do at the age of 85? You guys take it with you. So
we were lucky that way. So that treasure has been passed on to us, and we'd be happy to share it for anybody.
Yeah, if anybody ever wants to come and refer to them. So anyway, so this drawing has been done in AutoCAD. Like we said, the geometry has come from digital project. We get cuts from it. We put them into AutoCAD. There's a whole tedious process of this rigorous training of AutoCAD and digital projects that one has to go through when you join the office. Now, of course, this is the final form, like zoom in of that particular model that we were seeing earlier. So some more final shots of the model, and this is what the building kind of looks like at the end of it. I think Jayant, I think Priya is someone. I think
yeah.
Sir has a question, I think.
Yes, Shridhar and Shikha, great. We are going through an amazing journey with you. At this point of time, I have one question for you. I'm a hardcore structural designer, and whenever I see any complete building or building under construction, or for that matter, any plan, what comes to my mind is what could have been the structural system supporting this kind of a structure. But when I am having a journey with you, right from a sketch to a digital model, I'm not getting any clue what kind of a structure system there could be. So I was wondering whether you have a in-house structural designer or system, or you have associate from different agency, and at what point of time structural designer comes into picture. That is what I wanted to understand.
So the different stages of a project in the office are basically, first there's something called pre-concept design, which is the first set of ideas that we work around. At that point, there are no outside agencies working with us at all. Secondly, after that, once we enter into concept design, from the start of the project, at the concept design, the office engages with different we collaborate with different people, like for structural engineers, MEP engineers, acousticians, everybody, because there is a estimate that starts being created from day one, right from the concept part of it, because it's very important when you're doing these kind of complex buildings. So to answer your question, sir, we do not have any. There are no in-house agencies. Everything is a collaborative work. We have, Frank works with structural engineers like Arrow, Thomasetti, many more, right? I mean, to name a few, basically. So, yeah, I mean, Shridhar, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, and what happens is there's usually an introductory workshop at the early stages when we know our collaborators and we actually engage with them very early on. So for example, as this trellis is going on, there is a simultaneous dialogue that is happening with the structural consultants or the services team to try and understand if their inputs can be included, and that can also help shape or change or move this particular object. So that engagement does begin very early in the process.
Yeah, because when we work with hand, we can make many shapes and many folds. But there is a 2D curve and a 3D curve, and they're like so there are some points when the structure fails. So that is actually told to us right early on. So every time we make a model, like a digital model, it is passed on to our consultants for analyzing. So they also start using digital projects right in the beginning. And of course, I mean, that you can say it might be Frank's way of selling his own software.
Right, but that software also handles a lot of complexity with ease. And that's why it has been so successful.
And a lot of actually practices across the world now are using digital projects. Anyway, I mean, in fact, you have asked the question actually at the very right time, because the next slide, we were about to start talking about the structural design exploration for this particular project. So can we continue, sir? I hope we've answered your question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, the structural study also begins along with the schematics, but how it becomes one where design is demonstrated through some of these slides that we're going to show you. This is inside the trellis.
So here, in terms of structure, several iterations or several ideas are floated around. One of which, for this particular case, was an inverted igloo or a soap bubble, and seeing how that could help, hold on to the trellis without disturbing the central space per se. So then a lot of these models are then created to identify and visualize what that soap bubble or igloo would look like. And, you could see a series of flanking arches. I mean, it's kind of something like what Gaudi's inverted arches are, but not as sharp. Another idea that comes out is this idea of a central tree with the branches coming out, and the central tree and the branches also help tie into the idea of the neurons and therefore the brain institute. So it kind of checks on several boxes.
Yeah, and this particular tree on the left that you see is actually from Disney Concert Hall. This is not the tree that is part of this project. So it was brought in as a reference in this project because in this particular thing, part of it is a structural system, and part of it was mechanical flutes also. Like these are all mechanical vents, whereas the top three were structural. So these were from Disney Concert Hall, and they were brought in, but as the start point of the exploration.
So then modeling those tree branches so to say,
the different shapes and different iterations of those also.
And I think what got settled eventually was the bottom right one, where there's that bulk of a trunk at the base, and then the branches sort of spring out. And there is a tilt to it, so it doesn't look like it's vertical, but it actually has a slight sort of angle to it, and that makes it a little more dynamic. So that this particular option was chosen eventually because it worked better with the sort of circulation and the furniture layout of that central space. This central space was also something that was very important for the institute because they could rent it out and generate revenue, and therefore they had to maximize as much of an open area as possible.
And once the structure, these trees were understood and these branching was done, because this was the most critical aspect of how the structure would stay, because there are the building at the back, the static building, the clinical bay was more just basically a frame structure of column and beams. And then the models are further developed like for interiors now, because you're looking at the atrium with the central tree structure, and we're trying to wonder how is it going to play with the interiors. So now the ID study starts. Of course, when Frank does a building, he likes to do his architecture interior all together. So a lot of, again, photographs are taken from, like, this is the view from the entrance to the atrium space, and like what is the scale of the tree, how does the staircase come, what's the, when people are moving about, what's the ticketing counter going to be like. So a lot of internal photography is also done, and this model basically was a 1:100 scale model. So, and it was openable, so you could actually open and see all the spaces inside it.
And meticulous detailing is to be done with the, you can see the human figures also at different positions, different angles. So a lot of what could be a natural setting or what we would do in a digital visualization view is actually done in a model. And actually, surprisingly so, when the model is referred to and shown to the client actually responds to them much better. And of course, we have to have the signature staircase that is a Frank O.Gehry must.
And I mean, not just the complex geometry is studied internally, even like things like the basic room, a clinic room that is there, or a treatment room is there, even those are modeled to the same detail as the complex geometry is done.
So we'll just take you through some of the images of the final sort of.
Yeah, this is the front elevation of the clinical bay. Of course, this is the atrium space that we were just looking at, but this is in a banquet setup. So even the spaces are tested for different kind of interior setups, furniture setups, like, actual distancing proximity. And, it's also not just done for the office, but it's also done for our clients, because clients understand this a lot more, because sometimes they come and they just move the blocks around to see if is there a better way. So Frank always has his clients interact closely with the design versus like, hey, this is the design, take it. No, that's not how it works in his office.
There's always a conversation or a dialogue or a sense of engagement with all his clients.
So now that brings us to the end of our first part.
First
segment, I would say. And we are going to move on to surface panelization and mock-up, how it's done. So I've taken you through the entire journey from how pre-concept, concept, thematic, and DD. So during the process of design development is when surface panelization and mock-ups are done.
So in this particular topic, we're going to look at the Beekman Tower, which is basically a traditional tower at the end of the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. It's the tallest residential building in New York City.
And it's a typical wedding cake, like a tier block system in a tower. Again, of course, an urban model of the city, so that you can understand the scale of the building. We will not get too much into detail of the design of this, but again, you can see that sense of movement in the facade and the skin, as we were talking about. Hundreds of models of the tower and its its proportions, scale, everything was studied. In fact, Frank had to give up one end of the building that you will not see in any of the angles has become flat because of budgetary constraints with the client. He was not able to there was, so of course, so the thing is that it's a real project, right? At the end of the day, we're dealing with real issues. So if the client says, hey, I'm going to only spend X amount of money, how do you do a project within that X amount of money, right? So the third side of the building is flat now, and yeah, we do visit New York, do see this building. I've worked with on a lot of the apartment, because the main reason for me getting hired was this project, because I had worked in New York extensively on a lot of residential towers, and this was in its design development phase at that time. They needed somebody to come and look at all the apartment layouts. So I came in as a housing expert at that time in the office. Again, some more views of the model, the ground floor plan, and basically you can see there are two cores over there because it's a mixed use building. The ground floor is a school, and above that starts the so the ground floor is a school, and at the base and above that is a hotel, and then the condominiums on the top. Now for this particular project, going quickly, Bernini's folds was Frank's source of inspiration. He's been long fascinated with this, as in the beginning of the, Priya mentioned it briefly, and Shridhar also mentioned it. It's the sense of folds that he wanted to capture within his towers. So a lot of, these are different angles to it. So as the sun moves from east to west, the stainless steel facade shimmers across the facade to create an effect of a rippling fabric. So you can see the folds are there, and the sunlight, how the ripple, you can see the shade. I mean, I don't need to say, the photographs talk about it, So once the curves of the facades on the physical model are finalized, they're traced into the computer by a digitizer. We talked about the cloud point scanner earlier, but there's another tool called the digitizer for projects like this, because they're more rectilinear and they're more straightforward. You can use the digitizer to go and click points. So
it's basically like a pen that actually can take any point on space. Yeah. So you could literally trace a curve by picking points on that
on the model. Yeah. So for example, if I look at this, all the different points on this can be just clicked on this model, and the entire thing is mapped. And the good thing about the digitizer is that it translates and brings this particular is translated into a Rhino model. So now Rhino is used as a translator of this shapes and forms before it gets into digital projects. Once the curves of the facades on the physical model are final, we trace them into the computer, into the digital model, into a Rhino file. Then the surfaces are then created using NURBS. A lot of you are doing nowadays parametrics and 3D softwares. So NURBS surfaces are created to get the shape, the folds and the geometry. And
so what happens here is each of these panels is identified. For example, we are looking at this particular panel, which is called Zone 2, Phase 9. This one is called Zone 3, Phase 2. And then this one is Zone 4, Phase 3. So each of these panels are ID'd and tagged so that we can track them at any point of time. And once we are starting to generate drawings out of them, that tag stays in along with it all the way right through construction. So this is an interface of digital projects. Digital projects, or DP as we call it, is a proprietary software developed was a proprietary software developed by Frank O.Gehry on the platform of CATIA, which CATIA is actually basically used to design aircrafts and the skin of the aircraft.
And now digital projects has been sold to Trimble, that owns basically SketchUp and all, right?
Yeah, SketchUp and a lot of other softwares. Yeah. So this particular surface is part of Zone 5, Phase 5, which was shown earlier, which is...
You can see the Zone 5 on the right. This is Zone 5. One. And that's the one we're going to be talking about.
In digital projects, you can write scripts to actually automate a certain process. And that process is iterative. So which means that, and it's parametric, which means that if you make a move at one corner, it will translate itself all the way across the surface. So this particular overlay that you see is the overlay of windows and window openings, which is then booleaned off to create a final skin surface which looks like this. Each of these are then graded. So for example, all of these are individual panels. So each panel size is tagged and identified. So when you send this out to a fabrication setup, they are actually fabricating each of these pieces individually. This is similarly a portion for part zone 3, phase 2, which we had shown earlier, which is basically that red.
So similarly, basically, we go through all these panels trying to resolve it. So you have the surface, then you have the overlay, and then the boolean, and then you have the, the glaze, the glass, which is actually not going to be curved, it's going to be rectilinear. So how does that interface? That plus the framework, then and then you close the sill. So this is the process for a facade development, basically.
And then each of these, we also have control points for plotted with color to be able to tweak the surface ever so slightly to get the perfect curve. So all of these processes, all of this process is automated, so that every time you tweak a curve, the surface goes through the entire process of booleaning all over again.
So a lot of scripting is done, a lot of, so you don't, basically, I tell even a lot of people in my office when they come in, we unfortunately just use software as like, okay, we know we've been given AutoCAD, for example. We take AutoCAD and we just learn to draw with it. We don't really use it to its maximum that a software can do. Whereas in their office, we learn to do, like I used to handle 300, 400 drawings single-handedly. So I did learn how to script and how to automate certain, processes. Otherwise, I would be like not leaving the office at all. So I would like put something to, let's say, purge. Some small command is purge over 300 drawings would take me, a couple of hours to do it. So I would just put it to purge, and I would leave, come back in the morning. All my drawings are purged, saved, and ready to go out. So it's something like that. So all these processes are either, scripted in digital projects or in AutoCAD. But here, for example, you can see that it's not just the glass and the mullion. Eventually, you understand that there is the magenta represents the mullion, the green is the panel below, the red is the panel above, the blue is the analyzed flow. So all of these different surfaces are also moving as you're tweaking it. It is not just about the two surfaces that you're looking at, the glass and the window, the frame.
This is a parametric software. So imagine, let's see the next slide and I'll give them an idea. So this is one zone, one phase, and imagine the number of control points that are available here at your disposal to be able to control and tweak, get that absolute perfect curve with actual parameters set in where it will immediately show the glass in red or some other color in case you have deviated away from that parameter. So this process is completely automated, and that's the only way we were able to get those curves at the kind of accuracy that you require.
So now, of course, comes the time to test out these rationalized surfaces for all the different surfaces that we've done in 1:1 full-scale mock-up. Now, this mock-up is not done at the site or anything. This mock-up happens in our backyard. This is mock-up done by the office so that they can understand that what they are creating is right, not right, whatever that's happening. So in this case, we chose two portions, the average curve and the tightest curve. This helps us in confirming the thickness of the cladding material before it is going to be specified. So you can see this in red is one of the panels that we're going to be showing you.
Sridhar?
Yeah.
Sridhar, we normally see a lot of glossy materials to the building.
Yes.
Can you just highlight how these materials are selected, or how do they perform? What is the logic behind that? Can you just tell me how it happens really?
I think before Sridhar will talk about this particular material, I think, see, Parashar, right? Yeah, Parashar asking this question. Parashar, Frank uses all kind of materials. It's very sad that people identify him with only the metal sheets and the titanium sheets and the
yeah,
stainless
the
steel
audacity
sheets.
of using titanium as a exterior cladding material was only possible by Frank, but that's what put him out in the map, made him a rock star. But actually speaking, he has worked with all kinds of materials, starting from stone to brick to chain link fence to aluminum to GI, even glass for that matter, fluted glass
And
as an exterior
even
cladding.
our simple plastered surface, right? Like
And plastered
yeah.
surface, like you will find the range is to one end to the other.
And of course, it's budget driven, and whatever the
everything is budget driven. The only way it was possible for him to use titanium was because the stock markets had crashed and titanium was available cheaper than stainless steel, and so he immediately grabbed it. And actually Russia had dumped titanium into the commodity market at that point of time when Bilbao's material cladding was being finalized, and Frank said, let's just take it without any apprehension.
Yeah, like if you see his latest building that is done in Sydney, the one I had showed a picture of, that is completely done in brick. And you can see the same movement, the same folds and everything is there.
So the basic philosophy is that, number one, the materiality depends on the budget of the project. Number two, any material and every material has its inherent potential, and therefore one must try and push it to its maximum possibility. And that is basically where the entire studio strives for and drives for. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Or?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
I could keep going on, but I just...
I mean, we don't see you, right? So we don't know.
Good. Yep.
Okay, so now anyway, so moving on, we were talking about the fact that we're going to start making a mock-up of this particular panel. So this is like a kit of parts that is done at 1:2 scale, which is 1:50, basically like half scale model is that. To make sure that a member of 3 to 4 people can actually assemble this on site, because you're working at this tall height, and so again, this is all designed in-house. Since we have a huge park, like I was saying, that we have a backyard of a huge parking lot, we can test all these things out. So what you've seen is the images are quite self-explanatory, like how the mock-up is done. So then this is the final mock-up, so here you can see how the mock-up is getting attached to the basis of an existing mock-up, basis of course of another project. The one at the back is Novartis. There was a mock-up for that, because we needed a structure to attach itself, because this is a cladding that we're seeing.
And very quickly on, you can see that there are indentations in the metal.
Right here we could see
surface.
Indentations over here.
So then the decision of making the thickness of the cladding increase was almost immediate.
And of course, and very quickly, this thing is caught by Frank himself. So that's Mr. Frank O.Gehry, in his all black, standing there on a Sunday morning, looking at the mock-up, and he says like, hey, I don't like this. This is wrong.
So Frank is a Sunday guy. You may or may not see him work through. It doesn't feel like he's working at all during the rest of the week, from Monday through even Saturday for that matter. But Sundays are when he calls his core group, and then he starts basically delving deep into each and every project and each and every aspect of the project.
So anyway, what started in the office as models of wood and paper are now being tested out with actual materials before hitting the site. This process is completely iterative and exhaustive, but it produces amazing results. And then that's what I encourage. I mean, both Shridhar and I teach. We encourage all our students not to be afraid of, making models and, testing it till you're actually satisfied. We should not just give in very quickly to an answer. In terms of green, I would say, Priya, that if this is related to Frank's projects, I would say that sustainability has always been something that we never talk about in the office. It's just a given. Right. It's a nobody has to say that I'm going to make a sustainable project. Okay. So definitely we engage with sustainable consultants right from the beginning, just like how we engage with a structural engineer, things are built into the system.
Okay.
So, it's like Frank hates the idea of saying, hey, my building is green, or it's following these principles. He's like, these are things architects need to do. There's no giving about it.
There are two ways of looking at it. In the West, sustainability is looked at from a very technological perspective. So in Frank's case, for example, the efficiency of air conditioning, the efficiency of electrical paneling, and efficiency of plumbing is considered, and that is giving you sustainable points. But when it comes to the Middle East, and so in our part of the world where we do have we try and engage the natural resources to help create an environment of sustainability. The closest that Frank has come to
was at the Guggenheim.
Was at the Abu Dhabi Guggenheim, where the sustainability expert was engaged from the very first instance, and actually the formal structures of funnels were created to try and capture wind and actually pass it through the entire plaza, because
from the wind tower concept, basically
trying to air condition a 3 lakh square foot space was a humongous expense. So, and it was completely disregarded from the very get-go. So yes, sustainability is important. At times it takes a formal expression, but at times it's coming from a very technical perspective. But the priority has always been there to make sure that we engage with a sustainable expert or a consultant very early on.
Because this question was actually asked in context of climate response by architect Rahul Kadam, and Vivek Apte sir has asked a question which Jayant sir has already asked you. Jayant sir, if you can say a word.
Well, I don't have any more questions. I mean, the question which was asked was a little different, whether Frank faced any limitation because of structural engineering. That was the tone of the question.
Yes.
So, because Frank had some idea, but structural engineers said no. So, whether such kind of situation has come, because all the
Yes, sir. We actually, in fact, early on when we were showing those slides, we showed that there was the first thing that we had looked up in the Louis Brain Institute in the trellis that was done over there. Frank's initial idea was to do the inverted dome, just the way Gaudi was kind of doing it. But then eventually, on recommendations of the structural engineer, we started looking at the tree structure. So it was a collaborative process where. Where the structural engineer did, kind of recommend certain things.
Yeah, and so there have been classic instances which we call as legendary moments in time where the advisors or the consultants actually give a brilliant piece of advice, and that becomes a signature move. One of which was when an acoustician, Mr. Nagata, had come down to help Frank with the Disney concert hall. There is a fluted backdrop at the very behind the stage, and it's a signature piece. It's basically beautiful pieces of wood carved and kept there, but it's not kept there as a sculpture. It's actually working like an acoustic absorber, and that was something that Mr. Nagata suggested to Frank, and then Frank was able to create this piece of art out of a very technical, service-oriented thing. So that's why Frank is very, very respectful towards his advisors, and he really listens to a lot of them to see where he can find opportunities to create his next masterpiece. So structural engineers, everybody are way up there, and he really respects them.
So can
we answer one question that we see on the question? See, somebody actually talked about Mies would design everything, including furniture layout and sometimes the furniture too.
Yes.
But Frank would not like to do that based on what he said in sketches of Frank. But yes, Mr. Frank does design a lot of things. He designs furniture, jewelry, dog houses. He designs everything. Anything you want.
In fact, he was a far more successful furniture designer before he became a successful architect. So he has done a lot of these furniture, and some of them are very iconic, like his chair.
In one project, he did not do the interiors, which was there in Manhattan. It's the sale building that is there, and he was very unhappy about it because because the interior did not gel with the architecture. So after that, I think he's been doing all ID for all his buildings. Now, coming to the next part, which is the construction administration and construction of a building. We're going to start with the project Viscal winery in Spain. In fact, Shridhar and I had visited this last year itself. It's a beautiful project. It's quite old. I mean, we visited Bilbao also.
Last year, for the first time, we actually saw Bilbao, and we also saw Antonio Gaudi's project.
All extremely
believe you me, it is an amazing experience. And for all young students and architects or architectural enthusiasts, if there's any buildings that you would like to see when in Spain, I mean, you must make it to both of these buildings.
So again, we'll quickly take you through the construction phase before everybody gets super bored. I mean, I don't want to tire you all. But yeah, I mean, what can we do? The process was very exhaustive. So, and trying to capture it within a half an hour or 45-minute time frame is very, very hard, you know. So this was very quickly on the building, what this building was made up of. This building is a hotel, wine tasting area. So the lobby was on the lower level, upper level was rooms, and then the top floor was the tasting room. These are very rectilinear blocks again, and the basic form and movement was happening right here, what you can see in the canopy. So some construction site photographs, coming up the columns, foundation, scaffolding, building coming up. You can see how the blocks are happening. Scaffolding used to support the formwork. Slab edge being looked at, slab edge detail. View of the construction with the background, like what it's going to be like. A lot of photographs taken, a lot of photographs analyzed.
So again, I'm going to come back to some certain aspects of digital projects and how that has been a primary tool for the office to execute its design. So digital project is in case of such projects where we are doing it in a different country, it's not usually supported by a whole, thick pack of drawings, but it's digital project which we use as an exchanging tool between the contractor or the vendor and the office. So here DP allows for coordination between the contractor and the architect. In this case, the cladding contractor modeled the cladding panels on the surface, which was then reviewed by FOGA and commented back to him. Each of these comments can be tagged, and when you click on it, it goes straight to the part on the model. Hence, he's able to review these issues directly in the 3D model. This is another example of the commenting tool of the DP. It's actually quite a very useful tool for a design build construction setup. But instead of relying on the drawings, the 3D BIM model becomes a source of exchanging information. Here's some more example of the commenting tool. This was used exhaustively. So along with this, we also give something called the details. So a lot of RFIs are raised on the fly in terms of when the contractor is building it. So he doesn't require too much of detail, but when he's stuck somewhere, he asks for a certain specific detail, and so do we provide those details. Based on those details, a mock-up was created, but then comes along an issue. For example, the bottom left sketch here, this was a detail issued by the office where we said that the rivet must be precisely aligned with the top of the pipe or a dimple will result. And unfortunately, when the contractor was going ahead with his construction, the dimples did take place. So he was not very happy with the result. Of course, we were also not very happy with the result. So in the process, the contractor went back to his drawing board and he came up with his own detail, where he suggested a collar around the pipe so that he can put 2 rivets instead of 1. And that's what the detail developed into. So a lot of times what we've realized in the office is that local contractors come up inherently with their own sense of detailing. In India, it goes by Jugaad, but actually it's very, very useful in getting the work done in an appropriate manner. So here's an example. Here's that same collar detail being installed with 2 rivets fixed, and then you can see how smoothly the panels are now beginning to get installed. And of course, as any project, site visits by the architect involve some mistakes being pointed out to the contractor's team. Sometimes it leads to fixing or redoing portions of the cladding that have been wrongly done. Like this one, for example, did not have that smooth indentation. It was looking like a crumpled piece of tin foil, whereas it's actually a
smoother
curve like that. So this is, by the way, this is a titanium again.
Color titanium.
But here it was colored in the wine and champagne colors, so that the influence was the flamenco dancers of Spain, and how their skirts sort of, the colorful skirts sort of.
I mean, we have an image. I mean, we showed an image right in the beginning. There'll be another image coming later on.
So these are some of the images of the digital project model as compared to the
actual work
on site of the trellis, the framework for the canopies, that is. Some more views. And this is when the rectilinear part of the block is done, and then these canopies are now being fixed.
It's almost like, it's basically, this is how you can already see that the flamenco dancer skirts are coming into place. You can see the movement that's sitting against the background.
So, Parashar, I'm going to point out again, you can see the relationship between it's a contemporary set of blocks, but the relationship between, using a local limestone to tie it with the heritage building that exists over there, and then using a contemporary sort of contrast material as, to sort of captivate the audience. Next. And what is a tradition at the office? Pictures of the buildings are always going to be compared by the models. And this is something that, say you join the office as a young architect, you're obviously not going to be able to go to site. But what you see in the model while you construct it, and you take those meticulous photographs, throughout the evolution of the project, and then the project architect goes to site and comes back with his own image, there is this curiosity to try and see how we can tie that in with the model shots. So we're going to present some of those comparisons. So here you can see on the left is the real photograph of the building, and on the right is the model shot. A view of the canopy.
Yeah.
The left is actually the model this time, and then the right is the building.
This is the flamenco dancer skirts, which is where the left is the real photograph and the right is the model. And yeah.
So that's pretty much trying to cover the entire gamut of how FOGA designs.
So this, like to just, so the sketch, Frank working on his model. I mean, in case you guys are interested in taking his master class, you should do that.
I think there is a question here by Pitkar, sir.
Yes. It was a wonderful presentation. And as being in teaching for many years and also traveling extensively, what I find that a lot of students and even young practicing architects who, no complaints, but I find that a lot of people look at Gehry as a star architect, as a role model, and they tend to copy a lot of his buildings or the designs that he makes almost directly without getting into what you call what went at the back of making this building. I mean, I remember someone saying that, Gehry crumpled a paper and made a building out of it. But it's just not that crumpling a paper. It was Gehry who did it with some intention and the huge amount of work that goes at the back of it. And that leads to, look, if you go to tier 2, tier 3, or you go to Khopoli, Panvel, you see sometimes look-alike buildings as if it is Gehry version kind of a thing. So how do you see this influence factor without getting into the detail? Because there's a limited amount of details available as you've shown in your presentation today in form of books or things like that. So how does one go about it? Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll go first.
Yeah, Shikha, okay. Why don't you start first?
So, so the thing is that I mean, copying or aping Frank is definitely not the answer. It doesn't work like that. And in fact, a lot of offices have come out of Frank's office, like us, like our Plus Studio. There are many other offices within LA and within California that have come up, and nobody is actually aping Frank, because you cannot, I mean, that's not what you do. What you learn over there, what you learn from the entire process is that you need to have your own rigor. And if you have the rigor and if you can follow a process, then you can create your own architecture. And that architecture is going to be so much more meaningful than trying to just copy Frank and do things the way he does it. So within his office also, there are different design partners, and every partner has his own unique style of doing it. So they all fall under the Frank Gehry umbrella. But like, for example, for people like us who've been working there, we can easily identify who the actual design partner is within that. And you know, like I was saying, that we both teach there, and I always tell my students, like, one thing, he hates being called deconstructive architect. He just hates that term because he's nothing but deconstructive. He's a traditionalist. In fact, the way we work there is very similar to the way we work in our college studios, where we start with the design, a program brief, and you take the program and you meticulously go about making ideas and iteration. But definitely there's no fluff in his office. It's all about architecture and hardcore architecture over there, and a lot of hard work from young students who come as interns over there, because all the interns are the ones who are making models. They don't get to touch the drawing over there at all. But
Okay.
the way they are invested, sir, is phenomenal. I think Shridhar wants to say something.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I find that what you have observed and shared is also something that we find in the current academia, where we find students resorting to copying what's online or what's on a particular website without really understanding the process behind it. And architecture, and whether we like it or not, is not like product design or some, you know, some other field or web design for that matter, where you can just do it in a short period of time. There are inherent physical attributes that work towards it. There is artistic attributes that need to be worked towards it. There are functional aspects that need to be looked at. So all of these things, once being considered, then the resultant is a piece of architecture.
And what we try to show through this entire presentation is also that we want to break that myth that the office, for being so technologically driven, so like the fact that we are doing such advanced, you know, building systems and the way things are put together, the way the project is conceived is extremely traditional. And we also don't, you know, basically, like in the idea of parametric that we keep talking, we keep hearing nowadays kids talking, they think parametric means just do fancy curvilinear shapes. But that's not how parametric is actually done over there.
Right.
And
we are using technology only as a tool to help the Frank design. It is not a tool that designs for Frank. There is a difference there. Unfortunately, in today's generation, there is a misunderstanding that parametric design, or a software design, generated design, is basically something that the software does for you, and then that is actually trying to be a lazy architect, because that's not what you're supposed to do. It is a tool. You put in the input numbers and you get your desired result, and you evaluate it whether it works for you or it doesn't work for your design.
anyways,
sorry.
Yeah, sure.
If I may interject here. Number one is that our question and answer tab has been going crazy with questions, and some of those questions are extremely complex in the subject matter. So there are two things that I want to ask of you. Number one is that all those who really want to know more about this, can they connect with you over your phone or email or something like that?
Yeah, sure. That's why I said if anybody ever wants to come in, even like if they're visiting here post this pandemic thing gets down, they want to come and see actual drawings from the office.
Wow.
They're more than welcome. I mean, we both are carrying our sets on the project that we worked on, and luckily, like we said, that somebody has given us all the detail. I mean, for our projects, for our understanding, I always like to, like I said, we are also teachers, like in the sense we teach.
Right.
So when I get my interns, I like them to go through my sets, see how we have worked on them. You know, our one project takes 300, 400 drawings that we create over there. Here in India, we don't do that many drawings, because we shy away from making drawings. So I like to do that, you know, I mean, so yes.
I actually thank Jayant sir and Pitkar sir and yourself, Priya, for giving us this opportunity to be able to show and highlight to everybody, or students or architects at large, in terms of how Frank works. I mean, we were, like you said, we were one of the lucky ones who got the opportunity, but now we want to actually also show people and highlight to them that what are the efforts and what is the rigor that is required in order to produce such
I think we're also the only two
architecture.
people who have worked with him in India. Indians who are in India now. I think I don't think there's
So
anybody
we are
else.
probably one of the few only ones, I guess, who have
So
worked with him
Shridhar,
and come back.
at this point, I would like to ask Parashar, there are many questions, but just to sum up the content of all these questions, can we take two very quick questions and very quick answers to that, Parashar, if it's okay with you?
Yeah. So
They
I
sort
have like
of,
one question.
yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So it was like Shridhar, Shikha, you have been through a lot of these design philosophies, and we have been hearing about that. And there was a lot of learning that you have uh, taken from these processes. Now, uh, how have you implemented when you yourself started this practice in India? Because you moved from the States to India a few years back. And so how is your process? What is your interpretation of the process? So if you
So
can explain me this in brief, so we will actually understand like how that implementation of that process, and so that would be more relevant.
Parashar, I'm focusing on the word brief, okay?
Yes.
actually, in fact, I'm going to actually put I'm going to put my next slide.
Okay.
So when I was leaving the office in 2008, and I was in fact I was working very closely with Frank myself, and because he was actually, I was very lucky to be in that office at the time I was, because he was in this crazy mood of promoting women. It was all about women empowerment. So all the women in the office were being given opportunity, and like how the Indians we love to work extra and extra and extra on, and so I got to work very closely with him, and in fact. I have a lovely note from him which said that come back whenever if you don't like it back in India, just come back and work with us. And he also left us with a little note saying that, hey, when you go and do your own stuff, do not become like little Frank Gehry's, you do your own stuff. So
that is something that we've carried forward as a motto.
About Frank, I mean, if you guys ever want to go and work there, you should make an effort and do that. It's an amazing office to be in. And what's amazing is that, it's a very humane office. It's unlike star architects offices where you don't get treated well. I think our best memory in the US has been of working there, and the kind of relationships we formed. Of course, with the tedious process, we did spend a whole lot of time there. But it was it's great. And uh, everybody doesn't get to talk to Frank anymore. I was very lucky to do that. But if you do get any time moment to interact, it's great. Like I think uh, I love those few. I mean, I still remember them. Like when he would just walk by my desk, pick up some coffee beans from my desk, or he'll come in and keep questioning me, like, hey, is the design done? Is the design done? He'll be like on my case, like till the plan doesn't settle, because he's so anxious to start getting at the formal moves that he wants to make. I think my team cried once he came and he took the building apart just 3 days before the presentation. He took the model and just broke it apart. And I tell my staff the same. You should don't ever feel like design is over. Design is never going to end. And when he broke open that, it was the spa hotel that you were mentioning, Priya. He opened it, and what it did was it created a beautiful banquet space at a lower level, which later on everyone realized, hey, that was a phenomenal move that he's done, and the plan suddenly was looking like something else. So it's not that Frank doesn't look at plans. He does respond to the planning also.
Please.
So this is interesting, because at Frank's, what happens is, generally over time, because the old man keeps walking around, we just feel like, yeah, he doesn't interact, what to do. So there was a cry from the staff saying that we want to engage in an interaction with Frank. So Frank created lunch with Frank Gehry, where we could sit with him, a group of participants could sit with him and have lunch with him and ask him questions.
In fact, an 85-year-old man at that time was still carrying his thesis sheets. He was showing us his thesis sheets during that time, and I don't think we have our thesis sheets.
So at one point, I was there with Frank and having lunch with him, and I asked him, Frank, when are you coming to India, and what do you think should be the kind of architecture that we in India should look at.
Because last he was in India, he was inspired by the temples and he just used
so
that.
he said he likes Goa because I think the Pritzker family always visits India every once a year to Goa, and once they had taken him and he had gone down south and he'd seen a temple being clad for painting, and he was inspired by that and he used that in one of his buildings. Anyway, so he told me a very interesting story. He said, look, Shridhar, you come from a place and a country.
He said, Sridhar. Look, Sridhar.
Look, Shridhar. You come from a place and a country which has immense potential and enormous amount of cultural heritage. I don't need to tell you what you need to do. It's for you to go discover and extrapolate so that you can create something that is unique for your context. And that thing has struck with us very, very strongly. And I basically, that is a process in which we are also engaged in at Apsley Studio to try and see how and what are the methods and techniques with which we can try and, utilize our existing opportunities that are available.
Right. In fact, I'm so happy that this is exactly the question that I was going to ask you, that what are the memories which you carry which helps you in your day-to-day work? And
Right.
You've answered this question absolutely precisely and very beautifully. That's a nugget of information. So friends, I think I will be ending the session. And before that, as I said, I'll be asking 3 questions. You can put these answers in the chat box. My first question is, very simple questions all 3 are. What was the inspiration for the Ruvo Brain Center? You have to type the answer in the chat box and send it to me.
The brain.
That's my first question. So the second question is,
Wait, where do we need to type?
In the answer box.
In the chat box, you can put your answer.
Oh, in the chat box.
In the chat box. So whoever answers the first correctly will get the prize.
Oh, okay.
And yes. So the second question is, in the Bilbao, there is a material which is used. There was a reason why the material was used, which is used for cladding. Again, a very easy answer. So type it quickly in the chat box. And the third question is again also very simple. There's an iconic tower, which was the third project that Shikha and Shridhar showed us, usually known by the name 8th True Street, but what is it known also as? So again, all 3 are very, very easy questions. So I'm going to go to the chat box and see how many are going to answer that, and we'll get back to that later. Meanwhile, friends, it's been a roller coaster evening. Yes, we did go half an hour, but I think it was well worth it. And I love the way you went step by step. And Shikha and Shridhar, this has been an absolute treat for all of us. So on this note, I would like to say that we will all be closing the session here. I would like, Shridhar and Shikha, would you like to put your email in the chat box so that everybody can communicate with you, or your phone number? Can I send it to everybody?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You answered all the question, and in fact, before starting of the program, I had one question, that why this structure look like this, and that is quite unfolded very, nicely by you. And the structural system also, when we saw the interiors, we could say yes. I mean, he had, or even the structural engineer had a very different idea. So with this, I really appreciate your explaining the legendary. So I would thank both of you from my side. Priya, you take over.
Okay.
I think it has been quite elaborately explained the way the office works, and I think the question of how it is reflected in Indian context and that has been done by your office is also very well expressed. So the question that I had in mind is quite answered. So I'm fine with that, and I think it was good, and it was a great pleasure to see the works of Frank O.Gehry and your office. Thank you.
So if I may announce the winners of these 3, because they are in a tearing rush for me to see their names. So the question number 1 was that what has been the inspiration for Ruvo Brain Center, and that was the Stone Mines, Nevada. And I think from Shriya Bhagwat, I've got a message that Netra has answered that it's the Stone Mine. So I think Netra gets the first prize. The second question has also been answered by Mr. Makwana. He says titanium. And the third question has been answered by Anmol Jain, where he says Beekman Tower. So friends, please message me on 98500913334 and you'll get your prize. If you're in Pune, that will be easy for us. If you're not, well, we'll catch up soon. So on this note, friends, I think we will end the session and perhaps we'll have many more like these. So on the behalf of Epicons Friends of Concrete, on behalf of Wide Angle Forum, first and foremost, I would like to thank all our respected panelists for today. Engineer Jayant Kulkarni, Professor Yashwant Pitkar, Architect Parashar Moghe, all the entire admin team at Epicons who has made this possible, and of course, our brilliant, wonderful and generous speakers for today, Architect Shridhar Rao and Shikha Doogar. On this note, friends, I'll be ending the session. Stay home, stay happy. I think we are entering a very beautiful phase of our country now and look forward to catching up with you soon. For all your feedback and queries, do write to us at the Epicons address or wideangleforum@gmail.com. Thank you. God bless. Good night.